I have climbed trees all over the planet. I climbed the tallest trees on the planet, the largest trees on the planet. I climbed in some of the oldest forests on the planet, some of the largest forests on the planet. But my most favorite tree, if I could only climb one tree the rest of my life, would be.
This is The Butterfly Effect, a podcast that shows the big impact a small action can do. Tali Orad is talking to those special people that make a difference with nature and trees.
Welcome everyone to The Butterfly Effect. My name is Tali Orad. I'm your host and your butterfly here. My special guest today is Tim Kovar. Tim has been climbing, guiding, and teaching technical tree climbing worldwide for over 30 years. His love and respect of nature has led him into the remote jungles of the world in pursuit of his vision to help connect others to our natural world. Tim began his career 3 decades ago at Tree Climbers International in Atlanta, Georgia, where he helped develop the standardized curriculum being taught around the world. Today, he continues to work closely with the organization, serving as their international instructor and ambassador. Tim is a true believer in sharing his knowledge. He consults with eco tour operators and budding entrepreneurs wishing to plant their own schools. Welcome, Tim, to The Butterfly Effect.
Hey, Tally, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
When I think about climbing trees, I go back to my childhood when I used to climb trees. I'm assuming this is not the type of climbing you're talking about, and would love for you to explain a little bit more of what it means to be a professional tree climber.
As most children growing up, especially pre 1980, we pretty much all climbed trees as a child. We climbed them the way you're talking about, just hand over hand, foot over foot, branch to branch. And there was a sense of freedom with that. Well, when I got older, I still loved climbing trees, but you start realizing that body parts are expensive and this, you get hurt, you got to go to the doctor and it takes time off from work and so forth and so on. So I met a gentleman named Peter Jenkins, who's the founder of Tree Climbers International. And Peter had a tree climbing business, an arborist business, where he went around and took care of people's trees. And he is the one that kind of roped me into this activity and taught me how to climb trees using a rope and saddle, which makes the climbing much, much safer and also gives you a lot more freedom in the tree versus just climbing hand over hand, foot over foot.
So you mentioned the rope and saddle. Is this the only equipment you use for climbing trees?
Well, there are several different ways of climbing a tree. We're using the rope and saddle because it's proven to be one of the safest methods, not only for the climber to be up in the tree with, but also for the tree too. We don't want to be wearing the spikes on our boots
Mm-hmm.
and climbing the tree with that because that can damage the tree and actually end up even killing the tree. So the rope and saddle, there's several different ways to climb the rope. There seems to be new techniques and new gear being invented and discovered, every couple years. But some of the true folks that want to just kind of stay organic with it, number one, they'll climb free climbing, but that can limit you how high you can get.
Mm-hmm.
With a rope and saddle, just tying a few knots, putting on a specially designed saddle for tree climbing can get you into most of the trees around our planet.
Wow. So besides for fun, what are other reasons you'll be climbing trees?
I started climbing trees as a working arborist. So I was a tree doctor and taking care of the trees down in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
After doing that for, almost 6 months or so, I started working with Tree Climbers International, which is the world's first recreational tree climbing school. And at that moment, I was just facilitating and teaching people how to climb trees for fun. After doing that for about 6 months, I was invited out to a place in Michigan called Arbor Quest, and they were getting physically challenged kids out of wheelchairs up into the treetops. They were creating this tree climbing therapy.
Wow.
Then when I went out there to help and assist with the guiding and the teaching, I realized there's this whole other demographic of folks out there that need to know what life is like in the top of the trees. And that started budding within myself to take these techniques and share them with the world. So now I work with canopy researchers. I travel around the planet working with top-notch researchers in remote areas of forests and jungles. I also work with ecotourism groups down in the Amazon and in Central America, where
Hmm.
they're taking this tree climbing technique and turning it into a slow travel movement. It's not the zip lines where you're zipping through the forest. It's really getting people to connect back to nature in that one spot. I also work with a lot of photographers and cinematographers, think BBC and Discovery Channel when they're
Hmm.
putting the cameras through the forest, through the top of the trees, the canopy. Someone's got to get up there and rig up those cables to fly those cameras through there. And then I do work with authors as well, and then also arborists, So there's a wide demographic of folks out there that want to learn how to climb trees for different reasons. But one of my favorites that really makes my heart sing is when I'm working with Joe Public, just the average guy and, his family and getting them up into the treetops because they're the ones that used to climb trees a lot, most likely as a child, and they forgot that that world exists. And by introducing them up into the canopy, they get this reconnection back to nature, back to their inner child, and
Hmm.
they usually come down a little bit fuller and richer with themselves. And they have a tendency to look at trees and nature a little bit deeper than they did prior to the climb.
And how long does it take them to learn how to do that?
Well, we go anywhere from just a 5-minute lesson and a facilitation,
Hmm.
showing them how the knots work and how the system works, and then they're on their way. They're on their way to the top of the tree. Now, if they want to learn how to climb on their own, we have classes that range between 3 days and 5 days. We teach people how to climb the trees on their own, how to get the ropes in the trees, how to tie all the knots, how to do tree inspection, how to do gear
Hmm.
inspection, gear maintenance, how to tell if a tree is, healthy or sick. So we dive deep into those intensive courses. And during those courses, we actually even do treetop camping where we get to sleep in the top of the trees one night.
This is so cool. So, what are the do's and don'ts that you teach them when they climb the trees?
Well, for the do's and the don'ts, there's not a whole lot of don'ts. We do have some safety protocol put into place through myself, my school, Tree Climbing Planet, and Tree Climbers International, and all of our affiliates that we've trained over the years, over the past, gosh, TCI has been over 40 years. We have put up over 1 million people worldwide on these techniques and no accidents. A few rope burns and blisters and some bad haircuts because the hair gets stuck in the knot, and then we have to go up there and give them a free haircut, but it looks like a free haircut.
Wonderful.
But we do take safety number one concern, not just for the climber, but for the tree we're climbing as well. We don't want to be
Hmm.
damaging the tree we're climbing. So one of the don'ts is when you're climbing up there, don't be ripping off the branches and the bark and the leaves and all that there. Be mindful that you're entering into another domain. You're entering into someone else's home. The do's on this, what I try to get people to do at the very beginning is to set the tone and set the philosophy of this climb, especially working with the general public, is to think of tree climbing more as a place to be versus a thing to do. Now, you don't want to get too focused on just getting to the top. If you get tunnel vision and you're focused on, oh, I just want to get to the top of the tree, the top of the tree, top of the tree, you're going to miss a lot of the magic that's happening on the way up.
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey, exactly, because that's where the lessons are going to be coming in. That's where the connection is going to be happening too.
What's the tallest tree you climbed?
I've been fortunate enough to work with some canopy researchers and have gotten into a few of the trees that are over 350 feet tall. The
Wow.
tallest tree on the planet is about 370 feet tall, and so I've been in a couple of the 350s,
Wow.
and
That's
that's just a
sounds
completely
scary.
different magical world up there.
I'm sure. How does the world feel all the way from up there?
Well, you have a different perspective. You get this perspective of almost looking back into time. One tree that stands out on my mind, it's a giant sequoia tree
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Stag Tree, and it's the fifth largest tree on the planet. Not the tallest, but the largest. It's
Mm-hmm.
about 2,500 years old and is growing on private property. And this is how we got access to go and climb this tree.
Mm-hmm.
And the very top of the tree was blown out in a storm, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years ago. And there's a cave where you can actually sleep inside the trunk of the tree
Wow.
250 feet up. So imagine that the trunk of the tree is that wide where somebody with, 6 foot tall can actually lie down and sleep inside the trunk. And when I woke up in that next morning, I spent the first night with some friends up there. Then the last night was by myself. And I woke up that last night by myself. And I remember gazing out over all the giant sequoias in the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And it I felt like I went back into the land of the lost. I wouldn't have been surprised to have seen dinosaurs all kind of just walking through the valley. It was like
Yeah.
time really stood still there, and I was getting this glimpse, and it touched me. It was one of those moments in life where, this is a true moment, and I gotta share this with the world. Now, at this exact same moment where I was having this little epiphany of how beautiful and how wonderful this experience is, took my fingers and I was sinking them into the duff that I was sitting on where I slept that night.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was sinking my fingers into that duff, I pulled out a bottle cap.
No.
There was trash 250 feet up in a 2,000-year-old tree. And it just broke my heart. Now, it could have been from the couple nights before, friends that were up there, and just accidentally it fell out of the backpack. It wasn't, I'm sure it was
Yeah.
not intentionally put there. Wherever we go as humans, we leave a mark, and this became one of the driving forces for myself and my vision to be helping to re-educate people about the environment and the impact we have on the environment.
Yeah. That's the butterfly effect. You mentioned science, going up on the trees for science. What values can scientists get when they climb a tree versus any other way? I don't know, getting a drone or.
Yeah, so a lot of the researchers I work with, they're going up and they're doing some water measurements. How much water is being pushed through the tree, how much is coming out of the needles or the leaves, how much evaporation is happening. And they can only gather that information by accessing the top of the trees, getting up there and grabbing literally samples up there and then bringing them back down to the lab
Mhm.
or bringing the small little micro labs up into the treetop and doing the work up in the trees as well. And so they're coming up with some pretty exciting findings right now. So I'm told. I'm also working with ornithologists. There was a group in Hawaii that there was the decline of the Maui parrot bill, and they didn't know if the rats were getting the eggs or they were just naturally declining. So they
Mhm.
needed someone to train them how to climb up into these trees and put camera traps in the trees so they can videotape the nest. And so there's a wide, working with all kinds of different types of researchers going up for different effects, but you have to get into the trees to actually grab the samples. Sometimes just taking the drone up, you can get some good visuals that way. And even with true measurements of trees, people just want to know how tall the tree is. The most accurate way of doing that is to actually climb up to the very tippy top and drop a tape down.
And can you get all the way to the top? Is that stable enough?
Sometimes no. So we have just a ruler, a tape measure that
Right.
will just get to as high as we can, like within the last 10 feet or so, and then stick that tape measure up to the very tippy branch there, and then measure that, and then from that point there, drop down a string, and then measure the string out.
So how do you know when to stop when you climb? I mean, how high to go, what's stable, what's not?
Right, and that comes with experience.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, that comes with experience because, we have our standard rules out there that, the branches your rope should be over should be a minimum of 6 inches in diameter. Now, of course, if you know your tree species, you can go down a little bit lower than that. But if you don't know the species of the tree and how strong, how solid the wood is, then we go back to that 6 inches in diameter or about the size of your thigh. Um, but yeah, there are exceptions where we do, kind of have to, skirt around that rule. Especially arborists, tree workers,
Mhm.
the tree doctors, the guys and the gals out there doing the dangerous work. Man, they're having the helmets off to them because they're out there risking their life pretty much daily climbing, disease and hazardous trees.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned sleeping on a tree. I'm assuming you slept on others, and I'm assuming it happened many times. Do animals come and visit when you sleep?
Sometimes they do. Here in North America, I'm not that worried about it. We're in a fairly benign canopy here in North America. But we get down to South America or Central America or over in Malaysia in the tropics where there are creepy crawlies everywhere. You can be, yeah, woken up in the middle of the night with, a snake crawling into your hammock with you,
Oh,
or
God.
ants crawling into the hammock. I almost prefer a snake over the ants, depending on the snake, of course. But over the ants, because when those ants get in, there's nothing to do but get out, and you have to go back down. But here in North America, I've had some beautiful experiences where I've been sleeping in the trees, specially designed hammocks. They're called tree boats. They are designed for treetop camping,
Hmm.
kind of a cross between a portaledge for the rock climbers out there and a regular hammock. So it's like a platform with walls on it. Very stable.
And you tie it to the tree?
Yeah, you tie it, you anchor it off to the tree, and then of course you stay tied in the whole night. So you anchor up the hammock, you lower yourself into it, you get all nice and cozy, and you keep your rope and your saddle on the whole night. I usually take my helmet off just to make it more comfortable to sleep.
Hmm.
But if something was to happen, if you had to get out in the middle of the night, you could actually climb up out of the hammock and get back down to the ground. If lightning storm or if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you got to come down for that. So
Yeah.
nature does call even at the top of a tree. But one night or a few nights down in Georgia, when would sleep in the trees, I would have the flying squirrels come visit me in the middle of the night. In fact, one night they actually were crawling on my chest as I was lying in the hammock. So you got this deeper connection to nature going on where, on the ground when we're hiking or camping on the ground, wildlife usually for the most part kind of stays away from us.
Hmm. Hmm.
Where in the tree, it's almost like they're more curious. They don't feel us as a threat up there. And so I've had birds come and land right next to me. I've had monkeys climbing up my rope. I remember looking down in Panama, and I felt this tugging on my rope. I thought it was one of the students just tugging on the rope. And I looked down, and there's a howler monkey climbing up the rope towards me. And Tali, at first, oh my gosh, it was so cute. Like, oh my gosh, look how cute. And then reality sets in. Oh my gosh, he's coming towards me. Ah! So, of course, I shook the rope and he jumped off. And I don't know what he probably thought this was like the smoothest, softest vine ever to climb on. I'm not for sure
Right.
what was going through his head. But sleeping in the trees, it's one of the most magical moments of my life. Waking up and hearing birds singing above you and below you and next to you. You're like in this vortex of bird song.
Yeah.
And in the jungle, you look out over the edge of the hammock early morning and you're seeing the macaws flying underneath you. You see these rainbows just flying right beneath
Hmm.
your hammock. Because when you're on the ground looking up at the macaws, the parrots there, you see the silhouette. You don't really see the colors because it's all backlit in the sunlight.
Hmm.
But when you're on top looking down, getting the bird's eye view on the birds, the way that sun reflects off of those colorful wings, it's something you'll never forget.
Were you ever in danger while up there on a tree, either while you're sleeping or climbing?
Yeah, I've had a few close calls with my job working with herpetologists, these snake handlers. We were doing some climbs down in Panama and we were up about, oh my gosh, 55 meters in a beautiful ceiba tree. And the herpetologists, they assured me that this little snake that they were hunting called the eyelash viper, they assured me that they don't climb this high, that there's not going to be any snakes this high. They go like 10 meters, that's it. And so we're at the top and sitting on the branch, on this beautiful branch overlooking the Caribbean. And oh my gosh, it was just fantastic. And all of a sudden, one of the herpetologists looks at me and says, Tim, do not move. Of
Ouch.
course, when you hear that, what do you want to do? You want to move. You're like,
Yeah,
what do you
you
mean,
freak
don't
out.
move, don't move, don't move? And he's like, slowly look over your left shoulder. And as I slowly looked over my left shoulder, sure enough, about, I don't know, a meter away from me was an eyelash viper all coiled up, like ready to strike.
Oh no.
And I remember looking at him and says, I'm going to move. I'm not staying here. I'm going to move. He's like, yeah, I just moved really slow. So, I did. And I was not in harm's way at all. In fact, they were telling me later that these vipers can actually be in this coiled striking position for up to like 3 days, waiting for a bird to land or a mouse, a rodent to walk by to be able to strike it then. But for them to come after me, unless I actually touched it,
Right.
scared it, then yeah, I was really never in harm's way. So I've had some incidences with that, and then also I worked in India with the King Cobra Research Center, and they were going out and getting the king cobras that would go into villages and climb up into the trees in the villages, and they had to get someone to come in there and rescue the cobras and take them back out into the jungle and get them back into their natural habitat away from the villagers. But on that contract, I've learned by then. So in my contract, it was like I am not handling
No snakes.
snakes. I'll teach you how to climb, but I am not going to actually grab the snakes. So.
Yeah. So were they able to get those snakes when you climbed after?
Yeah. So when I was in India, they were not. There were no snakes. We didn't get any calls when I was there.
Okay.
So we taught them how to climb and all that. But I didn't. I saw some king cobras in the wild with them, but not actually up in the trees. And then the snake wranglers down in Central America, yeah, they were up there capturing the snakes too.
Yeah, that was a successful day for them.
Yes. Yes. Or what? They're like, oh, you're gonna be, in the paper. We're the highest recorded eyelash vipers. I'm like, I don't really care.
Prefer not to.
I prefer not to be, exactly. Yes. That's not a world record I want to set right there, personally.
Yeah. And after climbing in an area, do you ever come back to it or no?
I do. I do. I have my little, as people like fishermen have their little secret fishing holes.
Mhm.
I've got my little tree climbing trees out there too. And a lot of these trees I develop kind of a relationship with, especially the ones that I've been back to several times. It's just, if I'm feeling happy, there's this tree here I go to. If I feel a little bit sad,
Right.
a little bit down, I know this tree over here is going to cheer me up on this day. So I really look at trees as friends, and so I do find myself going out and visiting friends, just as Thoreau that went out and visited a friend in the winter time, like a 2-day hike to go visit a tree friend. So
Yeah.
I identify with that.
And do you see with global warming, do you see any changes with the trees that you go back to
I
or the
do,
vegetation?
yes, yes. Working with a lot of researchers, some of them are telling me that some of these trees are growing faster at a more accelerated rate, which, wow, that sounds great. They're getting taller. Well, they're getting taller, but they're not able to withstand the winds now, the high winds. And so the tops can be breaking out, from this
Mhm.
accelerated growth. I do a lot in the Amazon. I've been going to the Amazon for, gosh, over 15 years now and working with down in Brazil. And the first time I went down there, um, when I flew into Manaus, it was just a sea of green all around me, for like, seemed like hours as we're flying above the Amazon jungle. And now when I fly down in there, it's checkerboard. I can see where the clear cuts have been made,
Yeah.
over the past decade and a half.
It's very sad.
It's very sad, and it is. And it's the same with, taking people into treetops. Yes, there's going to be some impact. I'm not saying we're leaving no trace, but we're minimalizing the impact. And I truly believe there's a heavier impact on the individual themselves, and this impact being a positive one where they are getting this deeper connection back to the tree, back to the environment. When they come down, hopefully they're looking at the trees a bit differently, and maybe when they go to the next restaurant, they don't grab that handful of napkins. They actually are thinking about it. So I can look at these trees too as great teachers, great educational, a tool of some sort to be
Right.
teaching people about this connection back to the environment and how important it is. Because once they connect with the tree by climbing it, they actually see the tree.
Mhm.
They're not just walking past it anymore. So if we climb in city parks, occasionally we do for Earth Day and Arbor Day festivals, I get people that come out and they climb and they go, I walk through this park every day for the past 25 years and I've never seen this tree. But now I guarantee every time they walk through that park, they're going to see that tree.
Yeah.
And if there's someone in there that's damaging the tree, they're going to stick up for their friend. They're going to want to protect it now. They actually see the tree now versus just walking past
Right. It's not decoration anymore.
it. Correct.
What would you say to anybody that wants to start climbing?
Well, first thing, go out there and just hug your trees. They're everywhere. No lessons are needed for that. And if you're going to want to learn how to climb with ropes and saddles, climbing up into the trees, is seek out proper instruction. It's not rock climbing. It's not the same as rock climbing. In fact, it's very, very different than rock climbing or even caving. And make sure that they're taking care of the tree as well. By talking to your instructor on the phone or via emails, you should be able to get a good vibe to know where their heart's at on this.
Thank you. And what is your favorite tree? And not just for
Oh, I was
climbing.
waiting for that question. I was waiting for that question. So, my favorite tree, people ask me this all the time. I have climbed trees all over the planet. I climbed the tallest trees on the planet, the largest trees on the planet. I climbed in some of the oldest forests on the planet, some of the largest forests on the planet. But my most favorite tree, if I could only climb one tree the rest of my life, would be in my backyard where the tree climbing school is, in a beautiful Oregon white oak tree. It's about 100 years old. This tree is named Pagoda. It's the main training tree. It is so gentle. It's got a wide spreading crown with big beefy arms that when you climb up in there, up into the crown of this tree, it feels like the tree is it's hugging you versus you hugging it now. And I love when the students get up into the tree because I see the connection happening. I see them not only learning from me as the teacher, but the main teacher learning from Pagoda.
That's beautiful. Now it's time to go hug a tree.
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Tim. That was fascinating.
Thank you. And to all the listeners out there, yeah, just take that deep breath of fresh air and just be thanking a tree as you do it.
And thank you, everyone, for joining me today. We are all beautiful butterflies, each in his and her individual ways. I wanted to thank you for joining me today in this episode. I really appreciate you coming on this journey with me, and I hope you can join me next time. And remember, it only takes a small action to make a big difference. Be a butterfly.
And that's all for this episode. Thank you for joining us today. Please subscribe to hear more of our stories of change.